Good afternoon, everyone. This is John Raymond from AccessIT Group. It's a little past the top of the hour, and we still have participants who are continuing to join. But at this time, I would like to welcome everyone and thank you for joining AccessIT Group in conjunction with Gigamon, presenting today's webinar. Today, we'll be discussing the topic, Network Visibility in Today's Changing Traffic Patterns. We will be recording this session, and it will be made available later. We will also have a Q&A session towards the end, so as we go along and you think up questions, please go ahead and document them in the Q&A session down in your navigation bar. So we'll be taking written questions today. Next slide, please. AccessIT Group. While many of you listening today are long-term customers, some of you may not know as much about us. AccessIT Group is the premier security VAR on the East Coast. We have been supporting clients for over 2 decades from 3 distinct professional services practices. While we have many trained engineers and customized offerings within the risk management and cloud services practices, today we'll be focusing on elements of the technical services practice. AccessIT Group has been supporting customers for over 2 decades across 6 locations. Next slide, please. Today's presenters will be Greg Ricketts. Greg Ricketts is the Gigamon SME for AccessIT Group, as well as the Director of Technical Services. And we're very pleased to welcome Bassam Khan, VP of Product and Technical Marketing at Gigamon. So I'd like to thank both of our presenters today. And Bassam, I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you, John. Hi, everybody. First of all, thank you for joining us, taking the time out of your busy schedule. Very much appreciated, and hopefully you'll find today's presentation useful and valuable and actionable. So what I'm going to cover in the next 20-25 minutes is a very quick intro to who Gigamon is, then what we learned about the new tomorrow. There's an extensive effort underway at Gigamon to talk to our customers, our top customers, find out how they're dealing with the changes, what's working, what's not working, and I'll share those concepts with you, that what we heard back. And then we're going to dive into 3 areas that we've selected. One is TLS decryption, how customers are tackling that, application filtering, and then application metadata, which is sort of deep diving into the metadata attributes about traffic. So we're going to start off with a little bit more text, and then we're going to transition to more screenshots, and it's almost like a virtual demo that you'll be seeing. Before I start and dive into what we've heard back from our customers, what I want to share with you are 2 slides on who Gigamon is. So first of all, we're a technology company. We happen to have very good market traction. We're the top network packet broker. We call it Visibility Analytics Fabric provider out there. So we've got a pretty strong presence in every vertical market, in every industry, as well as service provider industry. So we are the most widely deployed Visibility Analytics Fabric. So I mentioned Network Packet Broker, I mentioned Visibility Analytics Fabric. What's the difference? Let me dive on that a little bit, which is we started off, this whole industry started off with Network Packet Brokering, but it's gone well beyond that. What's the function, what's the capability that a Visibility Analytics Fabric provides? It's these 4 simple steps. There's a lot of detail that goes into each of these steps, but at a high level, the first function is to access all of the data. So that your tools, firewalls and network monitoring tools, application monitoring tools, they don't have to go and get data from everywhere themselves. So we have taps, and there's many different ways of pulling the data in, but you're tapping out and accessing data one time. And after that, we aggregate all of your data in motion, so all network traffic in one place. Why is that useful? Well, if you're plugging in a brand new tool, it only has to go to one place. So we say minutes, not months, to deploy new tools. And these types of tools, including Gigamon, we also provide full inline support. So even for inline tools, you can plug those in. Let's say you're doing a POC, you can plug that into our system in parallel. So each of the POCs for, let's say, different IPS inline security functions are able to see the exact same traffic, and you can get a real apples to apples type of a testing. So once we've aggregated the data, there's a lot of rich functions that we can do, some basic functions and then some advanced functions. The basic functions in transformation are things like deduplication. We see about between 33 to 54% duplicate packets when we go into a new organization and they deploy Gigamon. that's a lot of duplicate packets. So by eliminating just simple active eliminating duplicate packets, your tools on the right-hand side, you see the traffic drop between 33 to half the traffic basically, which means that the capacity and the need for future purchases extends out much, much further. So it's pretty powerful, and that's the basic. The more advanced are things like masking data, application intelligence that I'll touch on, and so on. I'm going to skip over the analyze for now. There's a lot of advanced function there as well. So that's what a visibility and analytics fabric is. The question that we posed to ourselves as of 2 months ago is, whoa, everything's changing. How is IT leveraging or managing this kind of a rapidly changing environment? We call it TNT, which stands for the new tomorrow. There's different terms that people use. It's the new normal, the next normal. I've seen half a dozen different terms. We at Gigamon call it the new tomorrow. So we went out and talked to 22 organizations, and I probably was in about half of these discussions from all different industries and different functions, different ways that they're solving this kind of the current situation, the new tomorrow situation that we're in right now. We saw two phases. The first phase was this, what we call networking inside out, which basically means that all of the networking that was happening inside has suddenly moved to work from home, people coming out. And then the new tomorrow is the next phase of somewhat coming back to work, somewhat a hybrid type of an environment. IT budget has become much more uncertain nowadays. And so that's the sort of the new tomorrow where it's still being defined on what that's going to be looking like. But the one thing that's certain for the first phase, one thing that's certain for the second phase is changes. So people are running around making changes to networking at a much faster pace than before. And the other thing that they are also doing, that all these people are also doing, is a lot of them are accelerating certain projects. It might have been a cloud migration project, might have been a TLS inspection project, but they're accelerating a lot of those projects. So we heard back a lot of different ideas and approaches that people have had on how they're managing with this rapid change. I think we had about 29 different types of actionable feedback that we had and problems that they're trying to solve. So we kind of categorize those into the phase one, work from home, very specific to VPN concentrators. And then longer term, it's really around security, it's around performance. So we have to continue to function as we have always functioned with this rapidly changing environment. And then the budget is the other thing, which I don't really cover in this slide, in this presentation too much, but it's the notion of getting more out of the tools. And that's where a visibility fabric really helps a lot. So what we will dive into today are the three different use cases, which is basically decryption, application bias networking. So this is being able to identify applications and then looking deep into the traffic to understand it for better performance delivery and better security delivery as well. Let me start off with TLS. So what we have heard from TLS is there were a certain number of companies that were discussing their zero trust architecture at a planning level. Any new systems that they're rolling out, any changes they're making, they've actually applied that model on top of that change to make sure that the authentication, the policy, so the policy engine is able to see all of the data coming in. I'm not sure how familiar that all of you are with zero trust, but it's all about policy engines driving decisions where you trust but verify requests coming in. So you've got assets, which are users, and you've got systems that they're requesting access to, and all of those requests need to be verified before they're able to be authorized, before they're able to use those systems. So that notion has accelerated. And this is an example where I mentioned earlier, there might be cloud migration that's been accelerated or some other projects been accelerated. Zero trust is something we've heard from about half of the customers, particularly from the ones that had already some level of zero trust model in mind. TLS inspection has become a very, very big issue, and I'm going to touch on this in the next few slides. This is very, very important. The other approach, the other concept is how they're approaching decryption. It's not just, decryption is not the end function, it's really a means to an end, and means to the end there is really the ability to inspect TLS traffic. So why is it very important to inspect TLS traffic? A number of reasons. Number one, encrypted traffic is growing. Gigamon, we actually did this deep big data deep dive about a quarter ago, where we looked at 275 billion flows of enterprise customers. We have a product called Threat Insight, which is a threat detection response system. And with the permission, obviously, of the customers, we looked at a humongous amount of data, and we found this kind of a breakdown. So about 80% of north-south traffic is encrypted, and about half of lateral traffic is encrypted, and these are the different version numbers. We're about to rerun that query this summer, and we're going to update that. We expect to see a growth in both the amount of encrypted traffic for internal as well as external, but also growth in TLS 1.3, which adds a whole nother level of challenges for us. The second part of this perfect storm is that malware, any modern malware written now, is using TLS for its communications, for its command and control, for its insertion, for its inventorying. All of the phases that a malware goes through tends to be much more encrypted and hiding, better hidden in the system. And according to Gartner, not many organizations are decrypting today and doing TLS inspection. And there's a lot of reasons why. It's not easy. Every organization is unique. We all have our different way of deploying our tools and having our architecture set up. That makes it challenging for us to do any kind of decryption, particularly inline TLS decryption, which is what's required for TLS 1.3. So there's two types of decryption. There's inline and out of band. And there's different use cases. So most of the customers that we talk to nowadays, we work with, most of them are putting in their decryption in an inline fashion. There's still a need for out-of-band decryption for some organizations if you have some regulatory reasons why you're not allowed to inspect all of the traffic. There may be some technical constraints that people have. But for the most part, we're seeing a tremendous amount of growth, I guess, in our customers putting the effort in to inspect TLS traffic. At RSA this year, we had more people ask about TLS decryption and our decryption capability than every other feature that we have and every other sign that we have at our booth. So it is very, very, it's much trickier to do inline man-in-the-middle type of a decryption, but this is what's required for being able to see TLS 1.3. And if you have an advanced system like Gigamon, for example, once you're in that mode, we can still feed all of the out-of-band tools. So if you've had a whole set of procedures and tools and environments set up that's designed to inspect out-of-band traffic, that is very much supported in this model. So basically, we have four choices on decrypting our traffic, inspecting our traffic. The first choice, of course, is do nothing. So don't inspect it. And this is becoming less of a luxury as we go forward. I don't know how many people in the audience have seen this, but there's a document that the NSA put out in November of last year that talks about the importance of decrypting TLS traffic. It also talks about the challenges as soon as you open up that box on what to do with the traffic, how to handle it. There's all kinds of other implications that arise as a result of decrypting. But their overwhelming instruction, recommendation, direction, whatever it is, advice is to say that you really need to be inspecting TLS traffic more and more so going forward. So we have a couple of choices once we've decided, yes, we want to decrypt. The first choice is to do it at every tool. So every one of our APM tools, NPM, IDS tools, all of these different security and network monitoring tools have, almost all of them have some level of decryption capability. So we can just turn it on at the tools. But there are a number of drawbacks, the biggest one being you're taking a performance hit. So if a system is designed to monitor an application's performance and you turn on decryption, it's going to take away resources, it's going to take away bandwidth and throughput and so on from its primary function, because decryption is very, very CPU resource intensive. And so that's one of the downsides. Another downside, of course, is having to do this multiple times. The same data comes in, I decrypt for one tool, I have to decrypt again for another tool. I'm kind of repeating the same function several times. We can also choose to have something like a load balancer do decryption as well, or bring in some other third-party tool to come in. A couple of challenges there. One is we're introducing other vendors. It's another point of uncertainty that we have and variability that we have in our system. But more importantly, what happens after the decryption is done? As I mentioned before, decryption is not the end goal, it's a means to an end. And after I decrypt, suddenly I'm burdened with a number of responsibilities around compliance. Which tools should be getting it? Which tools should we be masking the data and hiding it? Which tools should we be sending full packets? So there's a lot of packet brokering like function that kicks in once I've taken that task that's not available from one of these dedicated tools. And our belief and our recommendation is to use a visibility analyst fabric to do that because of its capabilities of being able to dish the data out after decryption in a very precise way. And when certain instances, some tools may want to see all of the data, but guess what? It has my Bassam's PII information and it has Bassam's medical records. So the ability to mask out sensitive information, that's just one of the functions that these types of tools tend to offer. So it makes it a lot easier to be able to deploy tools. So the next set of the slides that I have really kind of walks you through our screen itself. And hopefully most of you guys are happy or comfortable with looking at actual screenshots. So this is our product. I kind of zoomed into a map. Without getting into super details, the top half is for incoming traffic, the bottom half is for outgoing traffic. The first line here, the first map basically says, first flow says that, you know what, just send all the traffic out without doing any kind of work to that, and just send it over to the tools on the right. So the right side, by the way, are the tools ports. The left side are how we've aggregated all of the data into one place. The second part is where it gets interesting. So if you see the GS, the blue GigaSmart boxes, what we're doing there is we're decrypting, and then the right one we're re-encrypting. So everything between these two blue boxes is our decryption zone. So at that point, you can roll out any kind of inline tool. Again, if it's a new tool, without bringing the system down, without weekend maintenance, you can plug in the tool and say, go test it out, and then have it go live and so on. You can have multiple tools. If we daisy chain, so if one tool goes down, we'll simply bypass the traffic. So it provides a higher level of uptime and so on. So we can also choose to have the traffic sent out to an out-of-band copy of the traffic over to certain inspection tools and such. And then we will re-encrypt the traffic on the way back out. The third flow here basically says, you know what, just don't decrypt, send an encrypted out-of-band copy, and then send the rest of it. The fourth flow basically says anything that we missed in our previous definitions of the map, just send it all over to the tool as is. So we make sure that we're not, our map design is not, doesn't have a bug in it basically, and everything is sending properly. So our customers have the complete flexibility on defining what to do with the tools as they go forward. So this is a little bit geeky, but hopefully this is useful for you to understand inline deployment. Now, as I mentioned before, every organization's inline deployment, SSL, TLS decryption and deployment looks very, very different. This needs to be, we would highly recommend this is handled by somebody that's done this many, many times. Otherwise, every organization is there's a huge learning curve. And this is where we work very closely with AccessIT, and both from just being hand-in-hand lockstep with what we're doing and their implementations as well. So with that, let me bring in Greg. Would you, are you online, Greg?
I am online. Thank you, Bassam. And thanks everybody for joining this afternoon. So just a quick recap. My name is Greg Ricketts. I'm a lead SE for AccessIT, and I do specialize in Gigamon, the Gigamon solution stack and portfolio, and specifically in and around inline SSL decryption. So AccessIT is a cybersecurity focused delivery partner with a number of manufacturers, including Gigamon, and inline SSL is certainly top of mind for us. And I just wanted to share a couple success stories that we've had over the years with Gigamon as inline SSL decryption has been deployed in the field, and as customers realize the need to gain more visibility into their security solution stack. So you heard Bassam talk about the uptick in the encrypted traffic on the internet, and even more specifically the traffic, the malicious traffic that is being encrypted, where traditional security solutions can't get application visibility into that, right? So with a solution like Gigamon, if we take a look at what this slide is telling us, right, all of a sudden something like encryption, which was traditionally viewed as sort of like a security requirement and a positive, is now giving us a bit of a blind spot to things that are now malicious and a potential threat vector. So how do we combat that, right? With a solution like Gigamon, where we can provide inline SSL decryption, and right now, obviously Gigamon can do both, right? Ingress or egress. For something like client driven inbound to outbound connections, right, to the internet, where everything tends to be encrypted now up to what we saw was 80%, and that was just as of last year, right? We can be that man in the middle, do the decryption, and then provide any number of architecture support for feeding inline solutions, out-of-bound security solutions, and even load sharing for scalability as the network traffic sort of grows in your environment. So very flexible in that nature. One of the challenges early on when inline SSL decryption solutions came out was they were very difficult to implement without completely impacting, negatively impacting the customer experience, right? The client experience. So, things like decrypting, financial or healthcare information. How do we deal with that? How do we bypass that? Maybe cipher support, has grown over the years. So, early on, maybe we weren't able to decrypt certain ciphers. And then, we see the uptick in TLS 1.3 adoption. So, older solutions, older traditional solutions that maybe said, hey, all I really need is a copy of the private key and I can do out-of-bound decryption and feed my security stack. Well, that's no longer going to be the case moving forward. And we see that uptick in TLS 1.3 support and adoption. We have to be in line. We have to be able to be the man in the middle and decrypt that traffic in order to feed our solution stack. So, when we bring these topics up in conversation with, either current Gigamon customers or customers that are interested in the Gigamon solution, we start to realize that, in this slide, we're talking about FireEye, right? So I think a lot of us probably on this call are familiar with FireEye and where its niche is and what it's good at, right? A lot of security solutions can block based on known IP, right? It's a CNC server, it's a known bad actor, but without application layer visibility, what's the power in that FireEye engine, right? That NX that's doing malware detonation on the application layer payload. If we don't decrypt that, then you're sort of crippling that solution in what it was designed to do. Now, this can expand and scale out beyond just FireEye, obviously, right? Anything that can act as an out-of-band or inline tool can benefit from inline decryption. We have a lot of success partnering with Palo Alto and their vWire capability. Their Wildfire, which is the malware detonation and detection engine there, in addition to application layer threat intelligence. All of that is driven and is successful by providing the visibility into that application layer traffic. And you're not going to realize the ROI on your security solution stack unless you're actually inline, doing inline SSL decryption, and then feeding those tools appropriately, either inline or out of band. Over the years, working with Gigamon, they've made tremendous strides in how they deploy and support this. So you saw on a previous slide, Bassam showed what is actually Fabric Manager and what they call their Flex Inline Canvas deployment. In much shorter words, what that really is a drag and drop visual editor of how you can orchestrate the flow map creation to make this solution actually happen without having to know sort of the guts of the solution and having to point and click and write, flow maps for everything that it takes to make inline decryption and then the feeding of out of band and inline tools happen behind the scenes, right? So a very robust solution, a very flexible solution. And quite frankly, it takes away a lot of the unknown and a lot of the heartache that came with early deployment models for inline SSL solutions across the board. So very good innovation by Gigamon. I have direct experience with deploying this solution, and with the innovation of FM and Flex Inline, it's certainly taken the time to deployment down significantly, and the ability to support multiple types of architectures where we can get in the middle of that encrypted traffic and feed multiple different types of tools, whatever the requirement is from the security team, from the customer. We've been able to add a lot of value there, and essentially just provide that visibility that that the security teams really need to identify threats on their network.
Great. Thank you, Greg. I have to say it's such a pleasure working with people like Greg that know both Gigamon, but more importantly, the deployment environments, because it really is a mapping of the two. And there's so much value and so much higher likelihood of success and projects going smoothly. So thank you, Greg, for all your work. The second case I want to touch on really is based around application bias networking. So it's a notion of being able to identify what that application is that's going over my network and treat it differently from a tools feeding perspective. So for example, VPN concentrators are overloaded. A simple answer to that is, you know what? If there's a boomerang kind of traffic coming back to my premises, I'm not doing split tunneling, let's not feed all of my tools, all the traffic. Let's take out Zoom, for example. Let's take out, if somebody's VPN'd in and all the traffic's coming in, let's take out their Spotify traffic that they're coming in from home. So being able to identify what the application is and just pulling it out, super powerful. Elephant flow, the same kind of a thing. Let's take some of these higher bandwidth applications and let's treat that differently. Not all my tools need to see that. I'm going to show you some screenshots of all of these in a second. OT, IoT management. This is becoming another really important item. By the way, feel free to ask questions in the Q&A box. I would love to hear if you currently have OT, IoT concerns about devices seeing traffic, these devices getting the right privileges, the right traffic, being able to not being overwhelmed by traffic and so on. I'd love to hear what kind of OT type of use case that you have as well. And then network change management. So if I'm making changes, any kind of moving things around, our CISO actually calls it, I said, how did Gigamon help you with this transition? He said, you know what, Gigamon helped me, and we're very biased obviously, but Jack said, Gigamon helped me run fast, but not into a brick wall. So as I'm making changes, are my tools still be able to see all of the data that's moving, that's in transit? And I'm not generating new blind spots, or I'm not overwhelming the tools all of a sudden with data it doesn't need to see. So I'm going to spend a couple of slides and screenshots on application visualization. This is kind of a cutting edge capability. This application intelligence has been around in networking for, I don't know, a decade. However, it's never been used to this extent, and I'll explain why. So its ability for network packet brokers, it's a tool that's sending all the traffic to all of the tools, be able to discriminate what that application is. This is the first dashboard that you get from Gigamon, and automatically picks out 3,200 different applications, which are listed on the right-hand side. These are the top applications in your environment. And we identify out of the box 3,200, and you can define your own application. If there's a if there's a corporate application that you've built in-house, you can write a pretty simple descriptor to start picking up that traffic and reporting on the right-hand side. Now, do we need to send all of these applications to all of the tools? Chances are probably no. And by the way, you can't assume that just because an application is on a certain port, that it is the right application on the right port. There's a common known attack called port spoofing, where somebody might use SSH traffic, just send it over SSL port 443 and pretend to be SSL, but it's really extracting and getting control if you're on premises machines over SSH type of traffic. So if you're saying, you know, I'm not going to inspect my SSL, I'm going to let all 443 through, that's a pretty common attack vector out there. So that was my dashboard. If I click on the top right, which is app filtering, app metadata, I take myself to app filtering. This is a screenshot of our actual product. So zoomed in a little bit. What I'm choosing here is that, you know, I have this boomerang environment. We've seen a lot of government organizations of our customers have this kind of enforced VPN traffic, no split tunneling, because they need to inspect all of the traffic. So common use case here is, you know what, let's pick WebEx, Zoom, and there's like 30, 40 different applications that it's part of this family. You can also say exclude the whole family and say, you know what, I don't need to send all of these traffic to all of my tools. Maybe I still do want to inspect some of that, but I don't just send it to all of my tools. So you're able to just say, send it to tools. So here, this is the next screen that basically says, I'm going to zoom in a little bit again. This is the applications I've selected. I'm going to be sending it to this set of tools. And you can define your own tools group. So each of these 5 items on the right-hand side are tools groups, tools group. And I'm choosing to send these traffic to these, but you know what? I'm going to drop my WebEx and Zoom traffic away out of these. You know, I don't just send it to WAF. I don't need to send it to email scanner and so on. So it's this micro-grained, fine-grained ability to extract out traffic. And it's not just for these webinars. There might be other traffic as well. So in this case, I'm choosing to filter out Twitter traffic, but Facebook looks a little more suspicious. So it's HTTP traffic, and within an HTTP Facebook session, I could be browsing someone's wall in a very friendly way, but I could also start up a chat window under the same HTTP session with a friend, and I can start sending them files. I can start sending them texts and so on. Maybe that needs to be inspected. So it really is up to our customers' level of inspection and privacy and balance and so on. But we provide the complete flexibility to get down to a micro level of being able to say, this is what I want to do with all the tools. By the way, one of the other user categories is shadow IT, and there's streaming media, there's social media, there's a lot of different items, and you can choose to select which application. We also have cryptocurrency mining traffic that we can tell, so it's not high volume traffic, but if someone's home and you haven't seen this, by the way, it's not one of the use cases that came up, but you have the ability to say, just show me if anyone's running a cryptocurrency program on their servers of the traffic that we're monitoring. So that's it. That's the second thing that we do. The third area is really around deep packet inspection. So it's a notion of understanding traffic that's beyond the layer 1 through, layer 2, layer 4. It's 4 and above. What's going on with my traffic? So I'm going to jump into that next. Before I jump into that, let's do a quick poll, if we can pull that up, please, on what, I'm not sure if I'm going to see the poll, but go ahead and answer the poll. Like, what is, yeah, here we go, thank you. So we provide a lot of different capabilities, and I want to see the vote on what is the most commonly, most widely deployed module capability today, as we, let me go ahead and answer this myself. Okay, it says host cannot vote, so I cannot skew the vote here. Awesome. But go ahead and answer. We're going to come back to this answer in a couple of slides. But first, let's look at deep packet inspection. So again, doing more screenshots, it's the same tool, it's the same UI. So Gigamon provides the same UI for any kind of backend data that's coming in. So whether it's on premises, whether it's virtual, whether it's cloud, public cloud, it's the same UI, container traffic, container to container traffic for east-west lateral traffic, so on. Same tool. So again, you'll see the screen come up, this tool come up in almost all things that we talk about. So in this case, we looked at application filtering. In this case, we're going to look at application metadata. Let's jump a little bit into that and zoom in. So I mentioned we do 3,200 application identification, 3,200 different applications. We provide over 5,000 data elements for metadata. So this goes one level deeper, not just identifying the application, but identifying some of the attributes of the application. So for example, in YouTube, we'll report back, Bassam watched this video at this time based on, and his session was a 1080p kind of a connection, and he was getting 44 frames per second. And then we'll report back a few minutes later, now Bassam's getting below 480p, and he's getting 8 frames per second. Now we're just brokering the data. We're sending data over to the tools. We don't say that Bassam's having a really terrible video experience. That's for the tools to decide. What we're saying is reporting additional data. Why is this important? It's important to dive deeper into user experience. So that data pumped into Splunk or QRadar or any type of SIM is extremely powerful because it allows you to maintain the resolution of the information and the visibility into all of the traffic. but you don't need to pump a ton of data into the SIM, so you can be much more targeted around what we do. Another use case, for example, is round trip time, RTTs. So we provide TLS RTT and HTTP RTT. So if you look at the delta between what the TLS connection looks like and how that's performing versus what the HTTP connection looks like and how that's responding, obviously HTTP is going to take longer than the TLS itself. And if you kind of trend it in a SIM over time, just kind of have this past week of data going every few minutes or whatever, you'll pretty soon start to see some applications misbehaving and meaning that, hey, there's not a problem with the network, it's a problem with the web application that's running because the delta between TLS time and HTTP time has just grown massively. That's one use case. And there's tons of use cases. Another use case here is for SSL. You have a whole set. You have, I guess, 68 different attributes that you can pump over to your SIM. In this case, we're choosing a number of attributes, including validity not after. So again, this is a deeper level inspection. That's a relatively new technology that's out there. And we believe we've kind of changed this, changed the industry in a way by offering this capability. So just another example of the many things that are possible. By sending this data into, in this case, in this example, we're using Splunk, we've found that there's almost 4,000 expired certificates out there. There's 136 that are about to expire. So this is real lightweight, but highly actionable information. So it's great to have a lot of this data, but how do you take action? This is what application metadata allows you to do, is to dive deeper and take an action based on what you were seeing out there. So hopefully this makes sense to you. So let's come back to the poll results. Could we see what the poll results look like? I don't know if that gets published online. Oh, excellent. Okay, which of these Gigamon optional modules do customers use the most? So really interesting. NetFlow being #1, App Intel being lower, packet deduplication. So up until 1 year ago, the #1 used deployed feature for Gigamon was packet deduplication. So that's the simplest thing. Once you aggregate, you can dedupe and lower the traffic to the tools instantly. NetFlow was very close. Good answer, whoever answered. NetFlow is very close to that. We launched application intelligence last spring, so April of 2019. And since then, this has been the most widely deployed capability for Gigamon in history of Gigamon launches, software launches. And as of now, people are purchasing and deploying more application intelligence than packet deduplication. Still kind of a close tie, or not tie, it's a close race there. But application intelligence has really been widely adopted out there, particularly with our existing customers that are adopting that capability. So with that, let me hand this over to John.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that, Bassam. What we'd like to do now is transition towards addressing your questions that you've been placing in the Q&A. And I am pleased that we've had a number of questions already. If you do have additional questions, please continue to put them in the Q&A section. And we do also have some information at the end of the session, should you think of one, after we close the call. So the first question we have from early on in our presentation, and Greg, I'll go ahead and pitch most of these towards you. We have, can you test Fabric Manager before going live?
Yeah, thanks, John. It's kind of a broad question. What I'll say about Fabric Manager is that when you configure a solution within that deployment canvas, there's actually a deployment step that you have to take before you actually make the orchestrated flow maps go live. So in a sense, yes, you can test that, and Fabric Manager is also smart enough to make sure that what you did on that canvas is actually going to be viable for what it configures and pushes out to your visibility nodes, right? So your HC chassis that you're actually orchestrating that config for. I would take it a bit farther just to say that there has to be a methodology, if I circle back to the inline SSL deployment, right? This isn't an all or nothing approach. So the beauty of the Gigamon solution is that we can actually deploy this in phases where we can do inline SSL decryption for a single IP address and allow everything else to flow through undecrypted, unaffected by what we configure within that canvas. So a lot of options there, but there's certainly a lot of intelligence in what FM is doing for you in and around Flex Inline, in addition to inline SSL decrypt.
Greg, if I can just add, that's perfect. And I'm going to take this one step further than you did as well. Question would be, can I also test my inline deployment before going live? And the answer would be absolutely yes, because what you can do is you can set up certain tools groups. Let's say this is going to be my inline inspection tool and so on. And you set up another set of tools group that says this is my out-of-band set of tools, and just put some Wireshark behind that tool group. You can put NTOP, NG, or whatever else you want behind that. So before you kind of roll out any new concept, you can just start sending the data to these Wiresharks and such, and you can look at the traffic, make sure it's all coming through before going live, and then it's really simple to take that tools group and just map it to, or map the traffic to an existing tools group that you're running. So there's many different ways from pre to mid to post that you can test before going live with Fabric Manager.
And Bassam, I might have to one-up you again.
All right, love it.
So one of the nice things about Gigamon, and something that I use very often, and it helps with sort of reducing the risk of putting an inline tool into a network and alleviating those concerns, is you have the option to wire up, like let's just call it an IPS, right? Inline IPS, it has an in and an out. You wire that up as a inline tool, but you do have the ability to do what's called bypass with monitoring, meaning even though I am wiring that tool up as if it is in line, I can actually test it as if it were in blocking mode, but I'm only sending copies of the traffic to it. And then once you validate the solution and you know that you're ready to go, everything's already wired up. You've already done your cabling exercise. It's just a matter of changing the traffic path from bypass with monitoring to inline tool. So very flexible in that nature as well.
Excellent. Thank you, gentlemen. The next question is, how do you handle privacy concerns with man-in-the-middle SSL decryption?
So Bassam, I'll field it, and then if you want to add on. So privacy concerns, obviously there's concerns about, call it URL categorization. So, you don't necessarily want to decrypt banking information. You don't necessarily want to decrypt healthcare, et cetera, et cetera. So, the Gigamon solution incorporates WebRoot for their URL categorization, and we actually will take action or don't take any action, right, based on the URL category cache that's stored on the chassis. From there, we can do a dynamic lookup to determine a URL that we're not sure of. So FQDNs, websites that aren't properly categorized, we can certainly handle those as well. And you have the flexibility to make a decision on whether you want to decrypt or not decrypt, or even wait until there is a returned URL category before making a decision. So Bassam, if you want to add on to that.
Yeah, certainly. And there's also the notion of masking if you wanted to mask some of the privacy-related information before sending it to the tool. There's also the ability to send encrypted traffic or choose which tool gets encrypted, which doesn't get encrypted. Sorry, decrypted traffic rather. So there's a lot of different flexibility, different options. So it depends on the policy. Some tools must see all the traffic. A DLP tool may not need to see certain amount of PII type of information. So you just have all the flexibility.
Thank you. And Greg, I think this may be a question that popped in during a portion of your presentation. It says, so what you're saying is that you can decrypt traffic once and make copies of it and send it to multiple tools simultaneously.
Yeah, 100%, right? So the whole idea with the architecture is to be able to decrypt once, feed many, right? That alleviates the multiple decryption issue with deploying point solutions in your network by accessing and aggregating all your, whether it's tap and ag or whether it's inline networks to a single visibility node, we're able to do that. So it reduces the number of times that we need to be the man in the middle. And then from there, we can slice and dice the traffic as deemed necessary by the security requirements or network visibility requirements.
Excellent. We've got a great question that I think may have a follow-up later on. It says, can I bypass SSL decryption? For example, banks often complain when SSL traffic gets decrypted. And as a follow-up, I think later on, the same questioner asks, I mean this as, can I bypass a specific entity for SSL decryption?
Sure, and that goes both ways, right? So client server, first and foremost, let's handle it using the URL category lookup. In addition, there is sort of a whitelist blacklist approach where you can input domains that you definitely don't want to decrypt, right? So whitelist, or domains that you absolutely want to decrypt all the time, aka blacklist, right? And then on the other end of that, right, there might be clients, maybe servers on your network that only go out to specific sites, and you don't really want to decrypt. Maybe a patch server that just goes out to download new patches for deployment, right? Just whitelist that client IP, right, versus having them constantly decrypted in line for something that maybe you trust, right? Bassam, I don't know if you have anything to add to that, but.
No, you've said it perfectly. The blacklist, whitelist is pretty widely used. There's also a SOAP API if you wanted to have it pump to the system on blacklist changes, and if you're tied to some other blacklist mechanism, you're able to do that as well. So for example, with AppIntel, we have a banking set of traffic coming in. So actually, this is a slightly different thing. When you combine decryption with AppIntel, you can say, you know what, don't inspect any of my customers' banking traffic. That's personal finance, and I'm not going to inspect that. Or medical, so we did a whole set of medical websites that we identify as part of 3200 applications. So you have the ability to fine tune at a super precise level on what gets inspected, what doesn't.
Yeah, so that probably rolls into the next question that I see in the Q&A. If you want to continue down that route there, how would you incorporate beyond just URL lookup and whitelist blacklist, and actually utilize application filtering intelligence into the inline SSL policy?
Excellent. So if you remember the flow map, that chart that I showed earlier for inline SSL decryption, within that decryption zone, you can add, drop, and drag, and these are all drag and drop. It's almost like a Visio type of tool. It's really cool. I love going into that tool. You drag and drop application intelligence module, and then within AppIntel setup screen that I also showed screenshots of, you can say, choose a banking category of applications after decryption within that zone, and just drop that traffic. Don't send that to any tool. So don't inspect that. Or you can say, send it to my, whatever special security tool that might need to see all traffic. Don't drop anything. So it's a matter of decrypting first, then inspecting, and only inspecting what you would want to inspect. So it's just the order that you set up, the decryption. We cannot do deep packet inspection, so we can't do app intelligence, app filtering, or app metadata on encrypted traffic. So that module must come within the decryption zone. But you have the full capability of just drag and dropping that into the flow.
Excellent. I think we're having a great dialogue back and forth between different questioners in our Q&A section. And I do want to encourage anyone who may have a question to please go ahead and navigate to the Q&A icon on your navigation bar, and please go ahead and submit your question. As a follow-up, there was a question, and I think you may have addressed it, but it probably bears underscoring. The question is, so doesn't that defeat the end-to-end encryption for credit card processing? And I think you talked about excluding some of that banking traffic.
I'm happy to take that. So There are some things that you don't want to encrypt, you don't want to decrypt, and the banking transactions, credit card processing would definitely be one of those. So that would be more of a case of blacklisting, whitelisting, versus choosing to where to send that traffic. With the man-in-the-middle approach, the man-in-the-middle entity, in this case Gigamon, actually sets up the connection. So if Bassam from his intranet says go to wellsfargo.com, the secure session goes up to Gigamon. Then Gigamon establishes another session that's a secure session to the cloud, to Wells Fargo in this case. So it's sort of like brokering the transaction with two encrypted sessions on either end. So it doesn't quite break it if we wanted to inspect that traffic as well for whatever reason. It's possible using the man-in-the-middle approach. But for something like that, we would, most of our customers would put that on a blacklist or choose not to go there using application intelligence.
Thank you for clarifying that. And the last question we currently have is, can your management platform be accessed by a third-party tool, tool providers, excuse me, via APIs?
Sure, I'll take that as well. Greg, if you want to add on, the short answer is absolutely yes. We have a RESTful API that every function in our Fabric Manager, which is a centralized management tool, is available through this API. Not only that, we also provide Ansible support. So Ansible is usually viewed as the tool for setting up, configuring new boxes. So if I'm opening up a new data center and I want to just replicate my environment, Ansible is really good for cloning my environment and just very quickly being able to set up boxes without a lot of manual effort. But we go further than that. With our Ansible, you can actually apply different flow maps. So for example, you can have the behavior of tools and visibility really to the tools change. So what's an example of that? First, an example is, let's say Bassam connects, it's just doing his business as usual, but something in the system says, oh, Bassam's doing something really strange. Let's start inspecting him more. So this is a hypothetical example. You can say, okay, I was not decrypting Bassam's traffic, but now he's on a watch list or whatever it might be. Let's decrypt his traffic and send it to more tools for security analysis. And then it turns out that Bassam is, let's say they found that Bassam's infected with some malware. So now I don't want to shut him off. Let's change the flow map again automatically through Ansible based on triggers coming in from some NDR or some threat system. Automatically, when you get to level 2, let's say, at that point, let's just full packet capture all of Bassam's traffic using a FPC tool out there. So the flow of the traffic gets kind of remapped based on Ansible playbook. So Ansible, we support Ansible, which obviously the RESTful API, but Ansible to also change the behavior of visibility, which is kind of cool. It's pretty unique out there.
Excellent, thank you. Before I address ways to contact AccessIT Group, I would just like to invite Greg or Bassam to share any final thoughts.
Sure, happy to go first. So first of all, thank you everybody. Looks like almost everybody stayed on till the end. Thank you so much. If you have any questions, do reach out to AccessIT. We would love to hear from you. We'd love to have deeper discussions into any of these areas. So again, thank you for your time and have a great rest of the day.
Awesome. Thanks, Bassam. Just one last thing I'd add. AccessIT, we certainly have the engineering expertise, and we're certified to the top level with Gigamon as definitely a top tier partner for us. Because of that partnership, we do have access to NFR gear in our lab, things that we can configure based on your needs, based on anything that you want to test out, in a POC, in a lab. Things that, quite frankly, I would directly configure for you, whether it's simple tap and ag to out-of-band tools, or if you wanted to test out inline SSL decryption, that use case, let us know, and we certainly have the hardware and the skill set to get that out to you for just to test out and see how it works if you're interested.
Thank you, gentlemen. Again, your presenters today have been Greg Ricketts from AccessIT Group and Bassam Khan from Gigamon. Thank you for your attendance. I'm sure that our attendees have found several fantastic takeaways. If our attendees have any additional questions, something either that wasn't addressed in our Q&A, or if you think of something after the call closed, or you'd like to discuss creating a customized solution for your organization, please contact AccessIT Group via the following paths. AccessIT Group is committed to supporting our clients during this challenging time. We want to thank everyone for attending today and, of course, our best wishes for your safety and health for you, your families, and your fellow employees. Thank you, and have a good day.